Hey, welcome to the Be Extraordinary podcast. This is Brett Young with Urban Young Insurance, and I have a special guest today with my comrades, Mr. Rod Erb, Taylor Young. We have Mr. Mark Graff. Welcome to the show, sir.
Good to be here.
Straight in from Claremont, Florida.
Long trip.
Into the DP.
I love it. That's great. Usually this is an informal setting where we're hanging out having a Graff cocktail, but now we get to be on air, hanging out, talking shop, and I appreciate you being here, buddy.
Yeah, man.
Do you know the full name of that cocktail?
God, you know, this
this
is a pop quiz. I should know. I should know the answer to this. I feel kind of embarrassed.
Can you do it, Rod? What's the full name of that thing?
I mean, I absolutely can, but I'm not going to steal any thunder. This is not the Herb Graff cocktail. This is the.
I want you to do it. I got to hear it.
I can't believe I'm going to say this on the air, but it is the Leesburg Roadside Rim Job Graff cocktail. Is that right?
Perfect.
Wow.
You were present when it was created.
I was there at birth. I was there at birth. We
Yes.
we welcome that little guy.
What's in that bad boy?
Oh, it's pretty simple. We got Tito's,
Okay.
Austin, Texas, born in the USA vodka.
Boom.
We have Diet Tonic because we care about the way we look. And we have fresh grapefruit that we milk into the drink. We work it on the rim, and then we take the knife and we infuse it vigorously.
Yeah. Wow.
It's a good one.
That takes years and years of practice right there.
Tell you give the ingredients to somebody, and it doesn't taste the same unless you've been through the course.
What's that? What's the saying? Man in the arena. Man in the arena exists exactly with craft cocktails. That seems to be the case.
No, with cocktails is a problem. Like, I'm an old-fashioned guy. If I go to a place I like old-fashions, it's beautiful. Have one or two of them. But then I'll get, all the ingredients at the liquor store, and I'll go to make an old-fashioned, and I'll follow the recipe, and it's never as good. I don't have game when it comes to the cocktail arena. So I got to get there, though. It's part of growing up.
I'll tell you what. It was actually fortuitous the way this was created, because you were there the day before. I stopped. You gave me a quick phone call, and you said, we're over at Mesa. Come on over and have a drink. And your buddy was behind the bar.
Mm-hmm.
Remember?
Yeah.
Oh, I do remember that.
Yeah. And so I'm watching him. We're visiting, and he's like an artist.
He's a mixologist.
And he's taking the lime rind, and he's twisting it, because it releases the effervescence, and he's working it on the rim. So I got all of that the day before, and the next night I'm making drinks, and I'm telling the story like he was telling me the story. He was making the drinks like I knew what I was talking about.
That's like pay it forward right there, but way more delicious.
Oh, awesome. Amazing.
Well, man, thanks for being here. This is super exciting. We've had a couple guests on the show, and when we had conversations between the three of us of who are some people that we would love to be on the show, your name is at the top of the list. You've been an inspiration to the three of us from literally the start of this journey. You've been a mentor to us from afar and from close. It's been a privilege to get to know you on a friendship level, but also just from a business level, and to have an opportunity to just talk maybe a little bit about your story today and what you've done, and potentially what the listeners could learn from your journey is awesome. So I appreciate you being here.
Well, with that, I think we should wrap it up, because that was pretty cool. Who was he talking about?
Man, he's talking about you, man. I
remember when I first got connected, because I think you first met Susan.
That's right.
Rod's wife, and then we connected. I'm trying to think what year it was, but it was early on, and we met at
Very
Starbucks, and we were having coffee, and about 5 minutes in, I was like, I think I stumbled upon somebody pretty influential in this community. And I just remember this story about how you got started in Claremont and all the development, and honestly being able to point at the buildings just across the street that you were a part of that I had no idea. And then also kind of how you managed and approached the Great Recession and kind of now what you're doing now. So, I mean, I remember that conversation like it was yesterday. That philosophy sticks with me almost every decision that we make. That kind of stuff comes into my mind just borrowing from that experience. So But I don't know how many years ago. I was at least 7 or 8 years ago, right?
Yes.
Amazing.
More.
Okay.
I want to say
More.
more, too.
Because I met you in 13, I think.
Well, what year did HVI open?
HVI, I think it opened around 13 or 14, and you were there for the grand opening, right? So, and I met you long before that.
Yeah, you had
Yeah.
met Susan and Taylor in 11, shortly
Yeah,
after we opened, 12 kind
probably.
of time frame.
Yeah, when you guys started in 11, you 10
Yep.
years?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I must have met you in, late 11 or 12.
I'm gonna, if I may, Taylor. I know you typically take this, but if you guys are cool with it, I'd love to run through this biography in front of us before we get started. If you guys are cool with that, one of the connections that Mark and I share and we continue to share is we're made in Michigan labels.
Yes,
Go
we
blue.
are.
Go blue. I get
Or
goosebumps.
brown.
I get goosebumps because when I you were the one that told me about the HVI opening. And, you should go meet Mark Graff. And I walked into Mark's office thinking I was going to walk in for a couple minutes, thinking I'll say hello and say I'm going to see you at the grand opening tomorrow of your latest project. And I think I left like 2.5 hours later, and we had just an amazing conversation, made an instant connection, and it's done nothing but grow from there. But so made in Michigan label, graduated from Western Michigan, went to Wayne State, big time athlete, played baseball, played rugby. Still wouldn't want to mess with you.
Old,
Yeah,
tired, broken down.
And I'll leave the volunteer stuff because I think that's definitely worthy of conversation as you start to share your story and what you've meant for the development of Claremont and just the bigger projects and how involved you are in that community. But I think what's really neat, and I'd love to get there later on, is all the volunteer work you've done and how influential you've been in some of the big moves that have happened to get to Claremont. But started with Ford Motor Company in 1980. Field sales manager. And I'm going to read this so I don't leave anything out. I mean, I've seen bios and I've seen resumes, and this doesn't start like, let me go sell popsicle sticks for a month or two and get some experience. I mean, you started in a very, very high level with Ford as a field sales manager, moved around the country. You were a sales analyst in Lansing, Michigan. You went from there to Pepsi-Cola in 1984. So you were 4 years with Ford Motor Company. Went to Pepsi in 1984 through 1981 as a regional sales manager, moved up. You started as a district sales manager, moved up to an assistant regional manager, to a national account manager, to a regional sales manager. Took you all over the country there. In 91, you left and went to Letica Corporation back in Rochester, Michigan. Came in as a sales manager, national sales manager, left that role as the vice president of sales and marketing. In 97, went to Fabrical Corporation as the VP of Sales and Marketing, again in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And then I think it was then that you kind of birthed your interest in getting in the development game and had some relationships. And again, I won't steal any thunder, but that brought you to Central Florida, and I'll let you explain that. But started a company with a great friend of yours and lifelong friend, really. Brought you to Claremont with St. Clair Development from 2002 to 2011. You were the president and owner of that company. You got in the franchise space for a little while with a McAllister's franchise that I will remember this story forever. We were there as you were building that out, and I just remember that plan coming to fruition. And then you guys, I just remember the conversation. It was always above system average. And I just thought to myself, there's no coincidence that you come into a franchise position and you follow the directions, and those directions lead to a pretty predictable result. But I know you were key in challenging a lot of those narratives, and I think your store benefited in a big way because of your experience and where you'd come from. But in conjunction with that, you made a huge mark in the Claremont market with your involvement and ownership in the Sylvan Learning Center, mentoring, tutoring, and I feel like that was kind of where your community passion was built, 2007 to 2019. And then Graff Development started in 2011. You're the owner and president of that company. GH Residential, on to Graff. And Graff Holdings was kind of the holding company that started back in 2000 that kind of held all these silos and all these different projects. But, I mean, man, I just want to echo what Brett said. Mentor is a word we use a lot. It's an important word to us, but personally, I know what you've meant as a mentor to Taylor and Brett and I as a company and the conversations we've had, but you and I have been able to share some pretty intimate conversations over the last, 6, 7, 8 years. And I hope I always do a good job of letting you know how much respect I have for that, but I just can't tell you how much it means to me that you've mentored me in the way you have. So welcome, and that's quite a bio, boys.
Hey, man. Yeah. By the way, Sylvan Learning Center, I am a product, man. I'm a believer. I had the biggest challenge with reading comprehension, man, growing up. And so in elementary and middle school, I spent quite some time in a Sylvan Learning Center, and I know how it helped me. So I'm just thinking about overall impact, and what an interesting, when I look at your, what do you call it, a bio, you call it a resume or whatever it is, it's such a unique, I was joking like, hey, I got 3 days, I just finished Mark's bio. But it's just such a broad spectrum of a career. You go from college, you have the athletic experience, and then you go to the big corporations. And I'm thinking about Ford Motor Company in the 80s, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, the car business back then was the business, right? That was in Michigan. It was a huge deal. And then Pepsi Cola, going through, the 80s and the 90s, a huge corporation, huge, and not that they're not anymore, but man, back then. And then to kind of slowly get more and more entrepreneurial. And I know when we talk, I kind of just borrow so much from your experience from one side of the fence to the other. Yeah. And you seem like you're still having a blast doing what you're doing. Maybe because it's all those years grinding in corporate America. And now you have this gratitude about building a successful business and kind of running your own show. But that's what sticks out to me. So I just have a curiosity of kind of looking back when you hear Rod go over that, what does that story mean to you where you go from corporate to the entrepreneurial route and everything in between, as far as that contrast and how you kind of, I don't know how you tell that story or kind of what it means to you.
Well, when I was going to business school in Kalamazoo, Western Michigan, I remember telling my roommate that I was never going to work for anybody. I was going to be an entrepreneur. And he says, well, how's that work? I said, well, I'm going to start a business. And he says, do you have money to start a business? And he knew I was broke. I said, no. He says, well, what business are you going to start? I said, I have no idea. So I was a kid with a vision, but no idea of where to start or how, so I had to go to work for somebody else. So I did that. And those first 2 companies were really great. It was 10 years and lots of opportunity. They had the Ford Marketing Institute. They had the Pepsi Cola Marketing Institute. Lots of classes in addition to the practical experience you get out working every day. And at Ford it started, I had I was an analyst, and then they put me out in the field. They called me in. It was kind of funny. I'm working in Lansing, and there were 34 district sales offices at the time. And they said, we're going to do a little reorg. We're going down to 29 district sales offices, and Lansing's gone. There's a district sales office right down the road in Detroit. Lansing's gone. But you're going to stay here, Mark, as the skeleton crew to close this thing down. And I was the last guy in. I'm only 6 months on the job, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm out of work when we close this down.
Wow.
And they came in and said, hey, we got great news. Normally you're an analyst for 2 or 3 years, and then you get the chance to go manage 4 dealers, and you get a company car and a territory. I'm 6 months in, and they said, you're going to get a territory, and you're going to report to the Omaha district sales office. I said, that's great. This guy, Ed Monagle's telling me this. And he says, you know where Omaha, Nebraska is? And I said, yeah, it's out in the plains. He says, do you know where? I said, well, it's out in the plains. And he says, I'm the same way. And he hit we're talking about how old I am. So he hit the intercom, and he said, Mabel, bring in the atlas. So Mabel brings in the
What's
atlas.
An atlas? To the listener.
I don't know what's older, the name or the actual atlas.
How great is that, right? Right?
Forgot those existed.
So you had a thing called a map, and you looked at it, right? And it was in a thing called an atlas, and if you needed one, you called Mabel through your intercom.
And that's not Siri, that's Mabel, man.
Yeah,
she's a real
Siri.
person.
Yeah, I mean, this is crazy, but that's how old I am. So at any rate, I end up in Nebraska, and the auto industry was terrible at the time. People were the farmers. I had a territory in Iowa, Coon Rapids, Iowa, Pocahontas, Iowa, Fort Dodge, Carroll, all these little towns. And 6 months later, I had 15 dealers. I had 12. So 3 of them went out of business. And one guy was a third generation Ford dealer. So, and he was losing it. Wow. And he was so distraught about it. I went, my boss said, okay, we got all the product. He's closing down. We're missing one car. There's one car that's missing. You got to go find that car. So I went in, and he says, I'm driving it. I said, all right. I said, I need you to buy it. You know, it's on your floor plan. So he writes me a check. I take him to dinner. He tells me, you know, he's leaving town that night. Not only is he closing the business, but he's leaving town. He's so embarrassed. He can't stay in his own town.
Oh, wow.
You know, 3 generations, and he lost that business.
Oof. Yeah.
So he and his wife are crying at dinner, and they're leaving. And, I'm a 23 or 4-year-old kid. And this is, talk about making an impact. That made a big impact on me. Wow. The next morning, I report to the neighboring dealer, and my boss calls and said, did you find the car? I said, yeah. He said, did you get paid for it? I said, sure. He says, where's the money? I said, I got the check right here. He says, cashier's check? Money order? I said, no, personal check. He says, I promise you that's no good. Go try and cash it.
Oh, man.
We lost a car.
Oh.
Yeah. So, any rate, so that's how the whole gig started. Was hard times, because you had Ford Motor Company saying, we got to keep these plants running. You keep pushing this iron on these dealers, and you got the dealers saying, nobody's buying them. So that was a very interesting way to start a career.
Interesting.
And then I jumped to Pepsi-Cola, and that was like a party. I mean, it was a whole different deal, right? So here I am. I'm in small towns in rural, and I had different territories. And I think I was in small towns and staying in Superior, Nebraska, in a little roadside motel. Then I go to work for Pepsi, and 9 days from the day I hired on, I'm in a tuxedo at the Waldorf Astoria. And Michael, and it's an advertising premiere, and Michael Jackson, we're sponsoring his tour.
Oh, that's
right?
Cool, yeah.
And it's like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
And then so it was like I died and went to heaven, and I moved around. I was in 5 cities in 7 years with Pepsi, doing all kinds of cool things and having lots of fun. And then I got the entrepreneurial itch again, and I had applied to McDonald's to get a franchise, and I was accepted.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they had a deal back then. I don't know how it works now, but back then you had to give them 20 hours a week for 2 years, free. So you worked in franchise-owned McDonald's, corporate-owned McDonald's. You went over to Oak Brook to their headquarters and went to Burger U, and at the end of the 2 years, they would grant you a franchise. And I said, well, look, I don't want to wait 2 years. I said, what if I did it full time? They said, we don't recommend that. I said, well, my wife works, so I could, we could. He said, well, people have gone through it in 9 months. So, I did a little soul searching and all, and I just decided I wasn't going to do that at the time. But I had this entrepreneurial itch, so I thought, I'm going to go to work for a smaller company, and I want to know the people that started it. Right. So I found this company, Letica Corporation, and there's this little old man, probably younger than I am today, but a little old man. I'm interviewing with the VP of Sales and Marketing. I'm interviewing for a national sales manager position, and then I get to meet the guy, the Magic, Ilya Letica, and this little old man comes in, speaks broken English. He's from Croatia, and I'm thinking, and during the interview process, you ask a lot of questions. You learn a lot about the company you're interviewing with, and they owned 13 manufacturing facilities, and they had no debt.
Wow.
And so I asked what the value of manufacturing facility is, how many injection molding machines they had, how many printing machines, and through the interview process, I'm thinking, and then they tell me about this big property he has in northern Michigan and this huge place he has out in the outskirts of 350 acres on the outskirts of Detroit, and that he's got a place in the Bahamas, and he's got 80,000 acres in Montana or something. I mean, it's just like, and I'm adding this all up, and I'm saying, you know, I don't know what he's worth, but it seems like it's got to be $500 million. And he speaks broken English. He came here to our country, didn't speak our language when he showed up. I said, well, I got to work for this guy, right? I've got to, there's some magic here and I could learn. So I did. I worked there 6 years and, you know, ended up being the VP of sales and marketing there and learned a ton from him, and then moved on to Fabri-Kal. I had gone to Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, and I was living in Detroit with Letica, and I was having babies, and I thought, boy, that college town, you'd watch the news in the Motor City, and it'd be about murder and crack houses and all kinds of bad stuff. And when I'd visit my friends in Kalamazoo, they'd have the high school football scores in 4-H, you know, and
Quite a contrast.
Yeah, you know, and boy, you know, Rod had a cow and he won the 4-H competition with Bessie.
Yeah.
And I said, well, there's a good place to raise kids. Maybe I'll move there. So I called up the president of Fabri-Kal and said, I think I'd like to come to work for you. And he says, well, I've got a VP of sales and marketing. I said, well, how's he doing?
That's a great question.
And he says, why don't you tell me how he's doing? I said, I have no idea how he's doing. I was just asking the question. I said, I'd like to work for you. It was August. I said, I'm getting a bonus in January from Letica Corporation. I will stay with Letica Corporation until I get that bonus, and then I will be leaving. Or I will start to work on leaving. I said, but I'm giving you kind of a first right of refusal here in the fall. If you can work something out, this is where I want to be. And he says, well, thanks for letting me know. Shook my hand, walked away. I thought, well, he thinks I'm a little arrogant.
Hot shit.
Yeah. I don't think I'll be hearing from him.
Let me erase that one from the whiteboard.
Yeah, and then it was really crazy. So that was in August, and I took the kids out for Halloween, and I'm back in the house, and then my phone rings, and it's the president of Fabri-Kal. He says, "Hey, I just let my VP of sales and marketing go. I'd like you to come in and interview." So I did that, and got the job and worked there a while, and started investing in Florida. I had a buddy that. He's one of those kids that got in trouble in school every day, and he showed up in 4th grade in my little Catholic school, St. Clair of Montefalco. And he's sitting right next to me. We sit in alphabetical order. I was Graff. His name was Hesberg. I was at the end of the row, went over to H, so he and I are in the back of the room, which is a bad place to put a bad kid. And so he showed me a whole different way to do school. He showed up in 4th grade, and he showed me how to have a lot of fun and get in a lot of trouble. And we became good buddies. And he ended up down here as a general contractor. And I was in church. I went home for a little gathering, a little golf outing my high school senior class does. So I drove across the state to Grosse Pointe from Kalamazoo, working for Fabri-Kal. I'm in the pew with my mom and dad at St. Clair of Montefalco Church, and a couple pews over is our Dr. and Mrs. Hesberg, and in the pew with them is Dan Hesberg, this kid I grew up with, but he lives in Florida. So afterwards I said, what brought you to town? And blah, blah, blah. So we're talking, and he says, well, there's these guys called developers, and I build a lot of stuff for these guys that are developers. And so I'm taking my shot at a couple development projects. And I bought some stuff, and I'm making a presentation to some investors this afternoon, at my dad's ophthalmology office. And if you could, I'd like you to come by. So I went and sat in. And he said, "What do you think?" So I said, "I'll let you know." And a week later we spoke, and I invested in a project. So I invested in a few projects, and before you know it, he was saying, you know, this investment, this development thing is taking on a life of its own. I have a GC company I run, and it's suffering because I'm spending time, you know, with the development company, and neither one is getting the attention it needs. I need to start a development company, and I need you to quit and come down and start a development company with me.
Wow.
And at first I said, you know, I don't know anything about your business, and this job I have is a pretty good job. It's not a job you just kind of walk away from. But I'll keep investing, and I'll fly down, and I'll pitch in. I'll spend some weekends down here and get involved. So I did that for a while, maybe a year or so. And he said, I have to start a development. This has got to happen. If you don't do it, it actually identified a guy, you know, Jimmy Crawford, who's a land use attorney, who was our land use attorney for our early deals. And he says, if you don't want to do this, Jimmy says he wants to do it with me. Jimmy Crawford, I'll come. So I called Kathy the next day. I was down here hanging out with Dan, and I called her the next day. I said, how do you feel about moving to Florida? So she came down, and 19 years later, here I am doing a podcast.
Wow.
No more Mabel.
Right.
No more Atlas.
Man, so
I'm high tech with these young guys.
that's right. Man, so it kind of turned into I'll help you build it. You know, I've got some money invested. I'll help you build it. How much of that was protecting your investment? How much was that you really wanted to go down and actually do the business? I mean,
What an insightful question you ask.
Yeah.
It was both, certainly. Okay. Yeah. I became very much aware how little we both knew. And when I invested, I was betting on the fact that I knew I didn't know anything. I was betting on the fact that he knew probably more than I thought he did, and he probably thought he knew more than he did. I mean, the leap from general contracting to development, there is some education that needs to happen in between, probably.
Right.
So, yeah.
So in regard to not knowing anything, because I know we can borrow from that a lot. How'd you bridge that gap quickly? Transferable skills, and just what was the biggest opportunity, biggest challenge when you made that leap?
Yeah, well, certainly skills are transferable. I mean, if you're a business person and you're paying attention, I mean, you had asked, book. You would ask me about, okay, what book was really influential? Well, people were real influential to me. That's my learning was on the job. I watched bosses, and I saw good behavior and bad behavior. I saw good motivators and very poor motivators. But I took every opportunity I could to learn. So a perfect example, and this is a long answer to your question, but when I was a field sales manager at Ford Motor Company, we all came out of sales and marketing into that job. So we had sales and marketing degrees. I had a minor in accounting, and I had interest in accounting, but not enough interest to make that my profession. So when I'm calling on these Ford dealers, they had to turn in financials to us each month. Well, none of the field sales guys at Ford Motor Company spent any time looking at these financials. I found them fascinating, right? Because now I get to see how this stuff works.
Right.
And there are 4 or 5 businesses in a dealership. You've got a new car business.
Right.
You've got a used car business. You've got a parts business. You got a service business. And some of them have a body shop. So it's a complex business to manage. And you could tell almost how the dealer ran, where he came from. If they were great in service, the guy came out of the parts and service side. If they were great in sales, the general manager or the owner came out of the sales side. So at any rate, I spent a lot of time looking at the financials. Ford had a great system where they compared like-sized dealers, so they had dealer averages and so forth. So I started doing analysis for the dealers. And they looked at me, how old are you? 24-year-old kid talking to you, and I'm talking to them about, he says, Ford guys have been coming for years, and all they want to talk to me about is
More cars.
more cars, more trucks. They don't look at the business with me, and I thought that was our job. You know,
Right.
I didn't know any different, right? But so I talked to my peers and found out none of them were really doing that. But that was very helpful to me. So as I went through, I developed skills at Ford. Pepsi always hired guys that were in consumer packaged goods. So they hired Procter & Gamble guys or Clorox guys or Vicks guys. And I had a boss who said, I'm going to do something different because this job at Pepsi, you call on independently owned bottlers, and you've got to motivate independently owned bottlers. And you, Mark, have been motivating independently owned Ford dealers, right?
Insightful.
So he says, I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to try that. And so he did. And I was glad he took the risk on me, and I loved it. But I saw my skills from the auto industry were transferable to consumer packaged goods, and then the two packaging companies the same thing. So when I got here, I think I was a schooled businessman. I had learned through that varied history. I had learned a lot about business and kind of the leverage points of business and how to motivate people, and I could sell. That's I cut my teeth selling, and I could sell. So when I got down here, you know, I started working the financial end of it to see if our loan was going to last till we got enough tenants, right? In a medical office building, we were building a 60,000 square foot medical office building.
Oh, wow.
And I ran around calling on doctors, convincing them that we had this emerging market called Claremont, and you really ought to come and open an office there.
Wow.
So I'd call on doctors all over Central Florida. So I played to my strengths. When I got down here, I played to my strengths. And then I learned more about development as it went along.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'll have one more follow-up question. I'm hogging it selfishly. But you mentioned the influence of the gentleman that was at Mr. Letica. Was that your eye-opening experience of like the entrepreneurial world where this guy came from nowhere and built this thing and now is worth $500 million and I don't even know, I just found out who this guy was? Or what was the number one or two things because that seemed pretty influential. Maybe threw some gasoline on your fire as a upcoming entrepreneur, right? What were one or two things you took from that extraordinary story?
Well, he had a strength of will like nobody I had ever known. And he wasn't polished. I mean, he was going to make it happen. And he did. And some of the tactics that he used were not ones I would want to adopt.
Questionable.
Right. However, it worked. And so the one thing that I really learned, you hear that no isn't no, it's just not now.
Right.
He lived that. Matter of fact, I can tell you a funny story that with him. He'd come in, little guy, and he had all this energy, and I didn't. My first few years there, I'm a national sales manager. I had a buffer. I had a VP of sales and marketing I reported to. When I became the VP of sales and marketing, I became his whipping boy, right? Just like the VP of finance, just like the VP of operations. And so he just kind of went around and yelled and swore, and and that was his style. So he comes in and he says, Dean Foods, we were bidding on that business, and Dean Foods bought millions of dollars of 5-gallon pickle pails and they packed pickles in these 5-gallon pails that we injection molded, and they went to McDonald's and Wendy's and everywhere in the world. And so he says, I understand we didn't get the Dean's Foods business. I said, no, we didn't. He says, how'd you lose that business? I said, well, we didn't lose it. We didn't have it. You can't lose something you don't have. And he said, you lost that business. He said, years ago, we used to do every single package for Dean Foods. He said, you lost it. I said, well, since I've been here, we haven't sold Dean Foods a thing. He says, Graff, you lost that business and you got to go get it. And he says, aren't you going to that dairy conference? I said, yeah, I'm taking off tomorrow. He says, well, you don't come back from that dairy conference without Dean Foods business. You come back without the business, you're not employed. Oof. I said, really? I said, yeah. Okay. So I go to the conference, and I have a few of my people that are in the dairy business that work for me that are there.
Wow.
And it's a huge conference, and all these people are there, and I'm looking for the Dean Foods guys. And I find Howard Dean. Howard Dean's the man, right? And Howard Dean has an entourage of people around him.
Right.
And I'm standing around the circle waiting to get in, and I can't get in. Everybody wants to visit with him, and then he has his entourage, and all of a sudden we're at a cocktail party right after the end of the conference, one of the days, and I see him bust off and beeline to the restroom. So I pulled up in the urinal next to him.
Oh, wow. This is good.
Introduced myself, told him Elia Letica said hello because Elia and him had a long-time relationship because Elia had sold him packaging way back in the day. And so we're coming out, and I said, I'm in a funny spot. He says, what's that? I said, you used to buy packaging from us, and you don't anymore. And he says, yeah, and I'm not sure why that's happened. And I said, well, Elia's not sure either. And we really need to figure out a way to do this. And he said, well, and I said, you just had something out for bid, and I think it's been awarded. He says, well, let me look into that. And he reopened it.
Wow.
And, we ended up getting the business. But the funny part was
No kidding.
I show up, the following week in my office, and Elia comes zipping in, and so how'd the conference go? I said, well, it went pretty well. And he said, so did you say hi to Howard Dean for me? I said, I did. As a matter of fact, I said, I told him how disheartened you were that we weren't selling him packaging anymore. He decided to reopen that bid for us. And he looks at me, he says, you're kidding me. I said, well, I wanted to stay employed. He says, what are you talking about? I said, you told me I couldn't come back. I mean, he didn't even remember.
Yeah.
He threatened my job. I got little kids. I need work. I remember. Yeah. He didn't even remember. He told me I couldn't come back.
That's an amazing story. The urinal?
So through the years, there are people that are influential, and you learn things from them, good and bad. I learned good and bad from him, but I learned that no just means not now, for sure.
I've over the years, that's a great question, by the way. I was thinking the same thing, and I love your stories, man. I've been privileged to hear your stories for a number of years on a bunch of different levels, but the ones that stand out to me, and directly to my question, is we've shared a lot of stories about sales leadership. Leadership, I know you're a natural born leader, command a lot of respect, you earn a lot of respect, but the question that I have specifically is, back in all those, I think about the story you told me about the guy that didn't like the guy he was calling on and wound up at a baseball game, and I'd love for you to share that story, but ultimately my question is, in those roles and with that influence, what are the qualities that you feel are just absolutely must-haves? And before you answer that, every time I've served with you on boards, I've been involved with you in community, programs and whatnot. Everywhere we go, you have a really gentle but direct skill of influence. It's something we talk about a lot here. I would love to know kind of how you get there and what sort of things are important, because I think a lot of the stuff you do unconsciously, if that makes sense.
So, and I'm sure that some of what I do is unconscious or subconscious, right? But if somebody's a glass half full, this is what I've learned, and I don't know if it's right or not, but if somebody's a glass half full person, there's a lot there. And it's really hard to take somebody that's a glass half empty person and make them a glass half full person. I've never been successful at it, and I've tried. So you got to start with somebody that sees value in life and sees value in doing things. And then next you got to find something that you care about, right? That you're passionate about. I used to stand in front of I'll go back to Letica again. I used to stand in front of the sales force, and I'd say, okay. And I used to call my sales force palesmen, right? Instead of salesmen, we sold pails, so they were palesmen.
I love
all right. So I'd say, okay, all you palesmen out there. I said, who wanted to be a palesman when they were growing up? Raise your hand. And nobody would raise their hand, right? So what did you want to be? A fireman, an Indian chief, whatever, right? They all wanted, when I said, well, we got to like what we do. And we're in the people business here. That's what we're in. And we have this amazing opportunity. If you look and say, I'm selling food and industrial packaging, how sexy does that sound? Pretty awful, right? Food and industrial packaging. That just doesn't sound like a fun career. But if you say, I sell packaging and I get the opportunity to look at all these different businesses. I can look at the paint business and the gypsum business and the strawberry business and the pickle business and the cat litter business and anything that's bulk packaged. I get exposure to all of these different industries and these different businesses and all these different people and all of their stories and all of their personalities. And so, you got to love what you do. You have to learn as you're taking the journey, I think. I love to learn. And so when I would go to a Glidden paint facility, I would grab the guy that ran it, and I'd ask him to give me a tour, and I would ask questions all the way through. And when I was done, everybody loves talking about themselves, right? The guy would like me. I like you guys because you're making me talk about me. See?
Yeah.
Everybody likes talking about themselves. And so I would learn a lot about that person, about his family, about his career, about his plant. And then I would ask my salesperson, and I would know more in my one call than the guy had been calling on him for years.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
So there's another answer, right? Is that you've got to ask questions. You've got to
Be interested.
You've got to be interested.
Yeah, and
right?
it's genuine, right?
Right.
That your curiosity, and how much that I just think back to your Ford story, right? Like where you were more of a consultant than you were pushing product, right?
Right.
Because you actually were genuinely interested in the way that their business was running, where your predecessors before you were just interested in what their numbers were at the end of each month, right? So, yeah, and I think that's a big deal. I think about anybody in my life I think the reason we're sitting here today and we wanted you on the podcast is because you've been so interested in us and you take an interest genuinely in who we are. And I think about anything with influence, anybody in my life, they're always way more interested in what I'm doing than what they're doing, And why is it? I think that's a universal just truth in every situation where you're trying to influence. So
I would agree with you.
Well, it's why you go on. Number one trip we went to Michigan. It's like, well, Graff's getting a group together. Like, we got to go to Michigan.
There's never an invite with Graff. It's
yeah,
always
exactly.
a promotion.
I was going to say it's more of it's a very direct, but a gentle direct where you just don't feel like you can say no.
You can't say no.
Yeah,
If you're getting a promotion from Graff,
at the end of it, you're glad you did.
You're like, damn, that didn't sound like he was playing around.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Can you speak to that? You know the story I'm talking about. I think people would love to hear that story because that speaks more to your philosophy, and I think it speaks more to who you are as a leader and an influencer.
Sure. You're talking about the Benjamin Moore story.
Yes.
Joey Calvano.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm one of the things that I did as a VP of Sales and Marketing. I didn't stay in my office, and I found that odd. That when I got the job at Letica and I got the job at Fabrical, people that worked there said, "You're never here." So I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be out with the people. I'm supposed to be training my people. I'm supposed to be in front of our customers. Well, the guys that had the job before you never did that. They sat here and they were on their computer and they were on the phone, and I just did it differently. So one day, the story you enjoy, I'm out with Joey Calvano. Joey's in New York, and calling on Benjamin Moore. We're driving up to Benjamin Moore, and he's grousing. And I loved his New York accent. He's grousing, and I can't do one, or I would try. But he's grousing about this guy he calls on, and we only have 20% of his business, and it's going down, and it's just not good. And we go in, and so Joey's doing a presentation to the guy about our products and about how we're performing at Benjamin Moore, and it's like he's lecturing the guy, our business is down with you. And he's talking to the guy, and I had to stop him. And I stopped him, and I tried to take the thing over a little bit and tried to massage the mess that he had created. And I asked the guy, I see some pictures, and I see his kid plays football. And so I start talking football, and I find out he's a Jets fan. And so we leave, and we get in Joey's car, and I said, Joey, drive around and point the vehicle at the building, okay? He said, what are you talking about? I said, just drive around, find a space that points toward the building and park it there. And he did. Roll down the windows, shut off the engine, so he did. I said, okay. So when you get here, next time you come to call on this guy, and I can't remember the guy's name, so we'll call him Taylor. Next time you come in and call on Taylor, I want you to come here. I want you to stop. I want you to make sure you're parked facing this building, looking at the Benjamin Moore logo. And I want you to look at it, and I want you to say, Benjamin Moore buys $3.5 million worth of packaging. I want all $3.5 million worth of packaging. I need all $3.5 million worth of packaging because I'm saving for my child's education. I've got kids I got to put into college. I got to put shoes on their feet. And Benjamin Moore is going to help me do that. And the way I get that done at Benjamin Moore is through my best friend, Taylor. I love Taylor. Taylor's going to put shoes on my kids' feet. Taylor's going to put my kids through college. I love Taylor. And I want you to keep telling yourself that as you're marching in the building. And when you see Taylor, I want you to have the biggest smile on your face and give him the best handshake you've ever given. And I want you to learn to love Taylor. Because right now, Taylor knows you don't like him. And you've dug yourself a hole. You've got to fix that, because this guy's never going to buy any more from you until he likes you. Because he doesn't buy Letica. He buys Joey Calvano. And he doesn't like Joey Calvano. So you got to change that. So Joey was coachable. And Joey heard me. And I've talked to Joey from time to time. How are things going? Well, Taylor and I went to lunch. I said, you ever been to lunch with Taylor? Never been to lunch with Taylor. You ever asked him to lunch? Yeah, but he wouldn't go with me. He's going with me now. I said, well, celebrate that. That's a victory. You made some progress. Well, a couple months go by, and I get a call on a Sunday afternoon. All this noise is in the background. And I've got a drunk Taylor and a drunk Joey on the phone at a Jets game.
Oh, wow.
Done.
Yeah. Yeah, we got all the Benjamin Moore business.
That's incredible.
So,
what a cool man. Well, I have one last follow-up. That is a great story. That does sum up a lot, man. That's really cool. So how much of your career, which this incredible journey that you've had, which I can't tell you how much I appreciate you sharing. So I've learned a ton through this conversation. How much of your journey has been sales and marketing, or how much of it has been leadership, and are they any different?
No, they aren't different, I don't think. Well, let me back up. So there are guys that can sell and market, probably can't be leaders. But I don't think there's anybody as a leader that can't sell and can't market. How's that?
Pretty damn good to me.
Yeah. The word that comes to mind is, you're thinking about sales and marketing, you think about leadership is influence. And, whether it's a customer or it's a product or whatever it is, or it's a person, the ability to, have an influence on another person, that seems to be what you've been an expert in. So
I don't know. You guys sure make me sound good.
It's awesome.
You guys make me feel good too.
Well, man,
I feel young just hanging with you.
it's perfect. That's perfect. It's the urban young, not the herb. Pun intended. Well, Mark, thank you for being on the show, man. Super awesome, super helpful to anybody that's out there. I know we all learn through stories. So hearing your story, but then also hearing like the stories within the story has been just an absolute treat today. So
yeah, I'm sure everybody's sleeping.
But
thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks,
Appreciate
fellas.
it, Mark.
You're awesome. All right, guys. Well, man, that's it for today. You guys are amazing. That was Mr. Mark Graff coming from Claremont, Florida, man. He's always been an incredible influence in our lives and an incredible influence in the community. So until then, bye-bye for now.